Welcome to the TalentGrow Show, where you can get actionable, results-oriented insight and advice on how to take your leadership, communication, and people skills to the next level and become the kind of leader people want to follow. And now, your host and leadership development strategist, Halelly Azulay.
Hey there, it's Halelly. I have a confession to make. I'm really excited about this episode. I think I say that a lot, but I'm really, really excited. I cannot wait for you to hear this. And you know why? A lot of the time, I interview people who are experts and they have a lot of domain expertise about something. They have a lot of knowledge about it. Maybe they've written about it, they've researched it, and often they're practitioners. So they actually have on the ground kind of experience with it. But rarely do I get to, I've only had a few episodes where I get to talk to someone who is actually in the trenches as a leader, as a people manager, trying to do a good job of it. And this episode is so unique because my friend Jeremy Epstein will share with you in a very raw and real and authentic and vulnerable kind of way his own journey to become a better people manager. And what he's done, which I can't think of that many people who have done what he's doing and the way that he's doing it. And he breaks it down and he gives you the tools. And it's just so real and it's so helpful. And I know you're going to learn so much from him. And he's like sharing along the way, like you're running alongside his car while he's on the racetrack and he's telling you what he's doing to win this race, but he's in the middle of it. And he's a cool guy. So I hope that you'll enjoy this. I'd love to know what you thought. If you could leave me comments afterwards, or you can email me or tweet at me and tell me if you like this kind of episode. And also, if you have some ideas for people that might also be great subjects for another show episode. You know, if you think that they're an exemplary leader or someone who's doing it really well, not an expert, not an author, not a coach, but someone who's in the trenches, oh boy, would I love to talk to them. So be thinking about that, right? Be thinking about if you know some role models. But in the meantime, I hope that you enjoy this fabulous conversation I had with Jeremy Epstein. Here we go. Welcome back to the TalentGrow Show. I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist, with my friend Jeremy Epstein, who is the vice president of marketing at Sprinklr, a top-rated social relationship platform for large companies. And he's also a prolific blogger and a networker extraordinaire. And I'm really excited to introduce you to Jeremy, whom I met in a networking function many years ago and have kept in touch with ever since, because he is actually on a quest that I think will be of interest to you. Jeremy, welcome to the TalentGrow Show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here.
It's really wonderful to have you here. And before we dig into your quest, I always ask my guests to give a very brief overview of their professional journey. If you can give like the really big picture, where have you been? Where did you start from? Where are you now? How did you get there? Just to give people a little bit of background about you and how wonderful you are.
I don't know about the how wonderful I am part, but I can definitely give a little bit of a background. So I guess the way I describe it is I'm kind of a growth marketer, and I specialize in helping take disruptive technologies into mainstream markets. So this has sort of been the path my career has taken. I started doing what we would call internet marketing in Japan in 1996, in the very early stages. Then I was in e-commerce in 1998, started my own company in 2000 on sort of a what we call a microservices, where maybe you'll see like a TaskRabbit type idea that we had about 10 years too early. Worked at Microsoft for a while, then helped a lot of large companies. And this is where we met in one of the networking events, help companies like Johnson & Johnson and Microsoft understand how social media was going to change the way they do business. And then as you shared, I now work at Sprinklr, where I've been for the past 4.5 years. I'm helping that company grow. When I joined, we had about 30 people, and now we have about 1,200. So it's been pretty crazy as we've seen the growth of these technologies. But my passion is always being about learning these cutting-edge technologies and then trying to translate them for mainstream audiences and understanding how it's going to impact the world in which we live.
Wow, that's amazing. And congratulations on not only your personal growth, but on the growth of the company that you have chosen to help grow. So well done. Yeah, very cool. And, I think what's interesting about you as a person is that you're very interested in technology, but in the social aspect of it. And you're really good at social in the high touch and the high tech way. I don't know a lot of people who do both really well. And I think you bridge that really well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So you and I have connected in a lot of different ways, and mostly, I guess, social professionally. And so I've enjoyed following your blog and following you on social media and seeing how you think. And I've also enjoyed watching your craft, because you have a lot of really interesting exemplary kinds of practices in terms of how you maintain your network. And maybe, another day we can talk more about some of that, because I think a lot of people can learn from you. Well, one of the things you do that's remarkable, and I've blogged about it, I'll link to it in the show notes, is that you call every person that you're connected with on their birthday. And when you called me on my birthday back in December, and it was a totally expected call, like Jeremy and my mom call me on my birthday, that's you usually don't allow people to ask you much about you. You're like, no, it's about you. It's your birthday. But I did. I got one in, and I asked you, what's got your attention these days, or what's a big challenge you're trying to solve? And you told me that you have a big goal to become a better people manager, which of course piqued my interest, since it's what I do for a living. And of course, you're not the kind of person who just kind of throws things out and then hopes that it will, the universe will just serve it to you on a silver platter. But you approach this with a very intentional approach. And this is where that quest I mentioned earlier came about. So would you please describe to the listeners, what is your unique way that you decided to follow up on this goal?
Sure. Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, about 8-9 months ago, I got some pretty strong feedback that, let's just say that my one-size-fits-all management style did not fit all equally well, and it was definitely not working. And, for about 24 to 48 hours, I was pretty unhappy, because nobody likes to get the negative feedback about their performance. But then I said, look, this is like everything else. It's an opportunity for growth. And then sort of I attacked it the way that I attack most things, which is a combination of very focused and disciplined execution, as well as leveraging the network and recognizing that I don't have all the answers. So the first thing I did was, once I started to isolate what the problem was, I basically built a strategy map and aligning sort of the tactics to my goal, which I sort of said, look, ultimately, I want to be a better people manager, but really this falls in the idea under the rubric of really being more compassionate as a person overall, and developing a sense of empathy. And so the people manager sort of flows from that. And I identified a couple tactics. So one of them, for example, is read a bunch of books around being a better people manager. So I can highly recommend Halelly Azulay's book around that. Definitely worth the read. And also being connected to people managers who my network views as valuable. And then I built a scorecard from that. So people sometimes laugh at me. They're like, Jeremy, you're trying to be more compassionate, but you're using a spreadsheet and a scorecard to do it. And my answer is that's exactly what I'm doing, because I believe that like your brain can be trained by the actions that your body takes. And there's a lot of research that supports it. So basically, if you force yourself to ask questions, to listen to people, to engage in behaviors that are more empathetic and more compassionate, that will train your brain to become more empathetic and more compassionate. So I measure myself on a daily basis. Have I done these types of behaviors, like hanging out with people who emulate or whose behavior I wish to emulate? So that's one of them. But I'm also very comfortable, and maybe some people don't understand this, I'm very comfortable sharing sort of the journeys that I'm on, because as you mentioned, I make a lot of birthday calls. I call about 1,800 people a year just to wish them happy birthday. And what I find is, you're right, I don't want to talk about myself because I already know what's going on with myself, but I don't know what's going on with you. And what I find is it's a really great opportunity to learn from my network about their lives, their perspectives, and just keep in touch. But sometimes people like you are smart and savvy enough to be able to get me to talk about myself. And you'll ask questions like, hey, what's going on? And that's where I feel like the best approach is just be very vulnerable, because none of us are perfect. We all have issues for areas for improvement, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. So basically to say, look, I'm embarking on this effort to become more compassionate individual, a person. I want to be a better people manager, make the people whose careers I'm responsible for more valuable, meaningful, and fulfilling. And honestly, I don't know how to do it. Like, I don't know the ways to do it. What do you suggest? What do you recommend? Are there people who you think are great people managers who should I talk to? So my approach has been, let me meet as many of these great people managers. Let me talk to people about what they think. And through that, start to build an understanding of what really great people managers look like and how they behave. And then to start to build that back into my spreadsheet of these are the behaviors that I want to execute until it becomes second nature. It's like a diet or exercise. It's like I'm just basically trying to build a new habit in terms of the way I engage with people, both, on my personal life, but also in the professional life.
I want to ask you more about your spreadsheet and the habits. But before I do, I just want to quickly follow up on what you mentioned, which is your approach was to ask people who is already doing it really well. And I don't know if you realize this, but in the world of human performance improvement, this is in fact one of the best ways to improve performance is to look for exemplars. Because a lot of times we try to look for what's wrong or problems and try to fix them. But in fact, if you look for who's doing it right and have more people try to learn from them, what are their workarounds? What are their tricks? How are they doing it? That ends up being one of the best ways to improve everybody else's performance who can learn from those people. So you're doing the right thing, and then you're sort of doubling the value that's created because you're sharing what you're learning with other people, right? Because you were blogging about it, so now more people can learn from what you're learning. So what an awesome approach. It is an effective approach.
I'll even take it one step beyond that. You're right. First of all, I'm glad to know that I picked up. I was probably from reading your blog that I realized that's what I should do. So I don't want to think I intuitively figured it out. But yeah. But not only that, but yeah, I'll ask people, I interview people, I put it on a blog, they benefit, but that's why I always love blogging, and podcasts are the same thing, which is I share it with the community. And then what happens is people will read it, they'll benefit, but they'll also say, hey, you should talk to my former boss so-and-so because she was really good at this too. And then it just becomes this virtuous cycle. Yeah. So that's how a lot of this happens. So it's really just keeps going in that respect. And that's what I love it. That's why I just hey, chuck it up on the blog. And, it starts becoming that's the idea of the conversation. Podcast, obviously the same thing.
So awesome. And of course, in the show notes, I'm going to link to the blog posts that Jeremy wrote about this. So obviously you wrote a lot about it. We are not going to have enough time to cover every single nugget of wonderful information that you share. But from those interviews, what are some of the key lessons that you learned? What are some of those things that you're putting on your spreadsheet?
Yeah, so great question. I've done about 7 formal interviews and probably another, 10 to 15 or so sort of informally. I mean, I'm constantly asking this question of everybody now. But, I sort of was thinking about what are sort of the big takeaways, and there are a lot of really good ones. One of them, I think that, I've sort of wrote down about 8 or sort of big Uber takeaways. One, I think, is there's really no finish line. You can always improve. And, I think that's something that, especially for someone who's very achievement or goal oriented, as I'm sort of wired that way, it's kind of humbling. Okay, there's no point where I'm done, because you're never done. So that's number one. I think the second thing comes back to what I shared before about the vulnerability is, I think certainly in American society and some other societies, it's not always so cool to talk about where you're vulnerable and where you're weak. We have to sort of display strength. But I actually think that's the opposite of what you want to do as a leader. Is everybody has vulnerabilities and weaknesses, and it's actually a sign of strength to be able to go to your team and say, here's where I'm very poor. Here's where I'm vulnerable. Here's what I'm working on. Because A, it establishes comfort and trust, and B, it gives them an opportunity to say, hey, you know what? Here's where I am. And it's okay, because as a manager, you want to know, where does this person not particularly do well? I mean, I'm a big sports fan, so if you're not, or if people are listening aren't, hopefully they'll get the analogy anyway. But if you're coaching a basketball team, you want to know who are the people who are, best suited to take the shot or rebound or play defense. And assign them appropriately. Don't make the best rebounder take the shot, because that's not his strength necessarily. So as soon as you find someone's vulnerability, you're actually going to be able to put that person in a position to succeed more rapidly and help the team overall succeed. So I think showing that vulnerability. And that kind of goes to the next one, which is really what is the core of each person? When I say core, it's really not just like their core professional strength, but what's really motivating them as an individual. I know, Halelly, you're a big fan of Dan Pink, as am I. And, he talks about, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So which of those three things is really sitting at the core of what's really driving each person on a daily basis? And to the next point, sort of understanding their goals and ambitions, not just on a professional level, but on a personal level. Because if you can help craft a career opportunity that allows them to develop as a person, then their opportunity for individual fulfillment and professional achievement is that much greater. And remember, there's a person there. And this is where I think I failed so miserably in my first whack at it, is like I sometimes just saw them as like resources to be deployed, like an assembly line or a machine, and not just a person with feelings and thoughts and emotions. And that's really where I think it was my big failing in sort of my first couple iterations. The next one is I took out of the Sheryl Sandberg playbook. She calls it radical candor, which is once you've established that trust, the single best thing you can do is have those very direct, straightforward conversations. Like too many managers, I think, beat around the bush and don't have the conversation. Say, Halelly, I asked you to get the project done by Friday. You didn't get it done. And that's not okay. So, and we need to fix it. So not saying, okay, like it's very straightforward. Or Halelly, that presentation was not acceptable. Done. Very straightforward. You have to have the strength to be able to have those hard conversations, but it all has to happen within a framework of the person feeling that you genuinely care for their career. I've never had a problem with the straightforward, blunt conversations. I did have a problem or a challenge with creating an environment where everyone felt that I was genuinely invested in their career, because frankly, I wasn't. And that was my failure until relatively recently. Hopefully it's getting better. The last couple is getting rid of weak performers as fast as possible. And that's tough because you want to give people a chance to grow and thrive. But at a certain point, you have to get rid of them because they take too much energy to manage. They take that energy away from your high performers, and it sends the wrong message to everybody else on the team that you tolerate that type of substandard performance. So you have to get rid of them. And the converse of that is obviously promoting and celebrating your superstars and really giving them an opportunity. And lastly, continue to overinvest in the relationship. It's just you can never invest too much. And that's hard when you're running around doing 1,000 different things, but you have to, put the time on. So like every Sunday night, I set up my one-on-ones with my team because I don't have a schedule that allows me to do recurring because there's too much dynamic in my schedule. But every Sunday night, I look at the week ahead and I make sure I have time with every single one of my direct reports and some of my skip levels as well to make sure that, hey, at least we have time to just connect, talk about whatever's on their mind and take it from there. So I realize that's a lot, but those are some of the ones that stuck out, from my, 3-4 hours worth of interviews so far, I guess.
Wow. Yeah, that's so much to chew on. So just a quick follow-up about the one-on-ones. How long are they? As a default, I'll sort of just set them up for half an hour, but sometimes, we're done in 15 minutes and we don't need it. And sometimes it's like, okay, we obviously have more to talk about it and we'll schedule more time. So I think it's just, we sort of set it up like, actually I set them up for 28 minutes because I feel like that's more fun than 30, but it's basically like that's enough time to get into a meaty conversation without feeling rushed. But again, there are weeks where we're like, all right, everything's cool, no biggie. Yep, we connected, fine. No sense just filling the time. So it's all, or it's like, hey, this really starts. I'm like, all right, you know what? Let me make sure I can find more time later today or tomorrow so we can finish it. So I just that's sort of the baseline. 10 minutes is probably too short. An hour, it's like you feel like you have to fill the time, and time's a pretty valuable commodity. So that's kind of how I operate. But I don't know if that's the right approach, but that's sort of what I do. Well, I think you already know that there is no right approach.
That's true.
Works for you, right?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's more like what works for them, not for me.
Yeah, for all of you. So,
right.
All right. So give me a very concrete one example of something that you put on that spreadsheet that's related to all of these findings, and then how do you track it?
So I guess, good question. So one is I make sure I have a skip level meeting with each of my skip levels, at least once a month. So, and I know how many skip levels I have and I know how many meetings I have. Number two is I make sure that every single one of my directs has a mentor from my network. And then I make sure that they're connecting with them at least once a month. And I just go through and I say, hey, did you connect with them? A third one is I want to be supportive of their personal goals. So I'll ask people, what are your personal goals? Like one person on my team is very interested in losing weight. Another person is interested, in quitting smoking and things like that. And then so every Friday I have a Friday morning ritual where I ping them. I'm like, all right, how do we do on the personal goals? Like, you're losing weight and your cigarettes. Like, yeah, I guess you could say they're a couple steps connected to Sprinkler, but that's your personal goal. I am just holding you accountable to the goal you told me you want to do, because I honestly want you to be successful. So I just have little calendar reminders on, like, Monday I do this, on Friday I do this, on Wednesday I do this, like little things that I just like, and it takes 3, 5, 8 minutes. It's not a big deal, but I just follow up on all of these little things spread across, the week to make sure that I'm practicing the behaviors that I want until they become totally second nature for me, which some of them have, but I still have plenty of work to do.
Very cool. Thank you for that. I think that helps people envision what you mean by that. So I think that you've described a lot of different ways in which you were showing your vulnerability by talking about how you were doing it wrong before, or that you were making mistakes before. What do you think is one of the biggest or most common mistakes that you've seen a lot of people make in their endeavor to be a people manager, or maybe that you personally have made that you weren't aware of, that you figured out how to fix it or overcome it or sidestep it?
Yeah, I don't think I'm at the point in my, it's like a big irony to me that you're even interviewing me about this, because I feel like I'm such a novice rookie. Like, what could I possibly tell people? Like, I'm such a, I'm like a guy who's just trying to figure it all out. So I'm humbled that even I might have something to offer people who have far more knowledge. So, but I definitely don't feel like I'm at the point where I can look across a broad range of managers and be like, oh, this is what people do. I know for myself where I failed miserably, and I've heard that other people sometimes have this challenge as well, as like I said before, is you have a one size fits all. It's almost like my way or the highway. This is how I manage. This is how I run my shop. This is how I do things. It's like, that's great. But I think what I've seen with great coaches, and I try to use the word coach instead of manager. Again, as I shared, I'm a big sports fan. So I look to athletics a lot for that type of inspiration. But like John Wooden, who was the legendary coach at UCLA basketball, or like great coaches of other, sports, is they all really understand how to treat their players as individuals in order to get the best out of them while melding them together as a team. Like, that's really, a hallmark of a great coach, is treating each person, coaching the individual, and not just saying, here's my style, fit, deal with it, just fit into it. And I think that's the big, like the epiphany that I had, which is, all right, you know what, I can have some structure. There's certain things. Some people need like very, clear guidelines and scorecards, and other people are just like, all right, here's your general things, and call me when you're done. And like, they just need different things. It's just like children, I have 3 kids. They don't all need the exact same type of attention for every single thing. And it's irresponsible to force them to do that. So it's, again, not that the people who I manage are kids, obviously, but, sort of treating them, it's like, hey, you do this well, you don't do this well. So let me play to your strengths. I mean, I know you're a big Marcus Buckingham fan, and totally, so am I. I'm a huge fan, and I actually have people do the Strength Finders report. I read them, and I try to commit it to memory and stuff like that. So it's like, all right, I'm going to do everything I can to double down on your strengths. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make you a better shooter. I'm going to make you a better rebounder, whatever it is, if that's what you do well, and let someone else do the things that you don't do well, because there's no sense forcing you. And same thing with me. Like, there's certain things I know, like there are things I'm really good at. There are things I'm mediocre at, and things I'm just never going to be good at. So it's like, just acknowledge those and say, all right, I'm not going to be good at, these types of things. So let's make sure there's a way to protect me from me on those types of things. And meanwhile, address the ones where I'm mediocre, or the things that absolutely have to be addressed, that kind of thing.
Makes sense. Wow. Great. Yeah. And I mean, as you talk and everything that I do, I always come back to thinking that leadership and managing people is just so full of paradoxes, right? I mean, there just seems to be so much information that says, do this while doing the opposite too, or the very flip side of something is really just doing it too well or doing it too much and so on. So it is really tricky. And so good for you that you're approaching it with this kind of openness. And I hope that people listening are inspired to do something very similar, because it is a never-ending process, and it's so when you say that you're humble, I mean, you're on a journey and you're learning and you're sharing what you learn. So, I mean, that's all it is. None of us know everything, and we're always just learning something and then reaching back and sharing it with someone else.
That's true.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you for something real specific that people can take away and act on. But before we do that, what's really exciting on your horizon? Like what's got you jazzed up these days?
Goodness, on the people, I mean, it's been really exciting because I think there've been a couple instances where we've kind of come up with this term as a marketer. I couldn't help but resist it. I've come up with a sort of a branding for the process. I call it Jeremy 2.0, and it's kind of picked up a little bit of a life of its own, which is both kind of scary and funny at the same time. But there are moments where I'll be working with someone and I'll say, a Jeremy 1.0 would have said, fire this person, get rid of them. And I would have had a short temper. I would have been quick to judgment. I would have been very lacking in understanding. And now I find that, I'm much more, I give the benefit of the doubt, which is the part I said. It's tough to balance that with to get rid of weak performers fast. Yes. So I'm really struggling with what's the right balance. But there have been a couple instances where I said, you know what, I'm going to really go against my natural instinct of just give up on this person or give up on this and really invest in this person or this team or what have you, or this relationship. And it's been so rewarding and so fulfilling to see that, these things have really come to fruition when in a previous life I would have given up on. And I'm then I start kicking myself oh, what else did I miss? I feel like an idiot, but at least it's wow, okay, there is this other way. And now it's just sort of expanding the tool set. So yes, there are times where you shouldn't give up on people or relationships or teams or projects, more people, I guess say, and it's worth it. And it really has this amazing possibility as opposed to, hey, you know what? All right, they failed the first time, they're done, which I think was my much more sort of, I'm not proud of it, but that's sort of how I used to roll. It was very aggressive 100% of the time. There's a room for that. There's a place for all of these things. And you just have to you have to have the wide skill set, and then you have to know when to use each skill. So you have a hammer, you have a screwdriver, you have a drill. You don't use them all at the same time, obviously. So that's sort of what I'm working on. That's just very exciting to be oh my God, there are more tools than just the hammer I had in my toolbox.
That's funny. I use that metaphor a lot. It makes so much sense, right? It's not easy, but it is so rewarding. Well, I'm really happy and very, it's very satisfying and gratifying to hear that you're enjoying this challenge that you're on. Out of curiosity, I saw that in your blog posts about this, you are seeking even more input. You're inviting people to connect you with even more people beyond all the other people that are connecting you with more people. So is there some kind of an ultimate bigger goal with what you're doing with this? Or are you just sort of thirsty, unquenchable, thirsty for more of this?
Yeah, I think it's really the latter. It's not oh, I need to do this so that I can do whatever. I just I realize no matter what I do professionally or personally, I need to be better at this, connecting with people, inspiring people, understanding them, motivating them, being a coach, being supportive, whether it's my kids, whether it's my synagogue, whether it's my it doesn't matter. So I'm in a phenomenal opportunity where a place like Sprinkler has brought this to my attention. They're coaching me, helping me. I tell people I need to get better at this, and I'm getting paid to do it. What a great gig that is, right? So it's pretty cool. So for me, it's just hey, this is part of the process of sort of preparing for whatever that next phase is in the grand scheme of things. So it's just a smart move. It's just look, I'm 43 now, and a couple of years ago, I was I should really just make sure I'm in good shape because it's a lot easier to get in shape on the early side of 40 than the late side of 40. So I changed my habits, I changed my diet, I changed my exercise. So it's the same thing. It's just sort of a transformation on sort of the, emotional intelligence side, if you will, if I'm being, I don't know if that's too self-aggrandizing, but I suppose that's kind of what I'm trying to make happen.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right, cool. I think you're inspiring. So thank you. So what's one specific action that listeners can take, maybe today, maybe just generally this week, that can help them upgrade their own leadership skills?
You mean besides read your book? Is that?
Thank you for that.
Was
Shameless plug. I love it.
Was that too blatant a promotional plug?
I'll take it.
You definitely should read Halelly's book, everybody. Go get it. Buy one for your friends. Give it to everybody. Don't be an idiot. It'll change your life. And then you can thank her later and what have you. You should actually I should also give props. I do want to thank you, since that was probably too blatantly self-promotional. I'm sure you don't mind. But you did also kindly point me in the direction of another book called Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go, which I really also enjoy. And they have this thing called the never ending interview.
Yeah.
And they give you like one questions, and it's just an amazing list of questions like, what aspect of past jobs have you loved the most? How do your strengths sometimes work against you? What can't you keep yourself from doing? So basically once a week, I go through that list and I pick out what's my question of the week. And then I just ask people in random conversations. I'm like, what do you think? Like, what's your strength? And like, so each discussion I have with people kind of becomes like this ongoing exploration and discovery. So that's very simple. You don't have to do anything unusual. Just like, hey, you're having a regular conversation. By the way, I mean, for some people, it might feel like a little awkward the first couple times, but trust me, it's not a big deal. People love it. People's favorite topic is themselves, so they'll talk about it. And, you really get a chance to understand the person a lot more. So maybe that's one thing that I would recommend.
Cool.
And, but buy Halelly's book.
Thank you. Yeah, so the book that Jeremy just described, the second book that Jeremy just described, which I did send him after he told me his goal, because it seemed like such a perfect kind of guide, was written by my friend and mentor, co-authored by my friend and mentor, Dr. Beverly Kay, who was also one of the early guests on my podcast. So I will link in the show notes to that episode, because she gives lots of interesting stories too. And I think that book is fabulous. So good. I'm glad you're enjoying it. And thank you for suggesting it. So how can people stay in touch with you, learn more about you, and follow the cool stuff you're doing?
Sure. Well, I'm kind of all over the social web. JER979 is sort of my handle that I've had since 1991, and I kind of have stuck with it. So Twitter, LinkedIn. I do have a website, neverstopmarketing.com, which was my company and is still sort of my overarching mantra that I sort of maintain. And also a Sprinkler, SPRINKLR, no E, because we have to be internety and cool, of course, sprinkler.com. So any of those places, I'm happy to keep in touch, and I'm always looking for people who have suggestions or recommendations, and I love connecting people with other people. So if there's any service I can provide to any of your listeners, within reason, of course, I won't give you my kids. You can have that. I'd be happy to do it, but I'm really, whatever makes sense, but happy to stay in touch. And any friend of Halelly's is a friend of mine, I think, for the most part.
Thank you. Thanks, Jerry. And he is a connected guy, right? Because he does this networking thing so well. So in an authentic and true kind of connection. So it's worth it to connect with Jeremy. I do recommend. I have benefited from being connected with him. And see, now you benefit from my connection with Jeremy, because now you get to learn from his learning journey. So thank you. Thank you for being willing to be open and sharing vulnerably about your learning journey to becoming a better people manager and improving your own leadership skills. I think that everyone listening should go and take the actions that you've suggested, or at least act on a couple of things that you maybe sparked in them. And thanks for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. What did I tell you? Wasn't that an awesome show? Isn't Jeremy such a cool guy? And don't you feel inspired now and also equipped? This makes my heart so glad, because, podcasting is not what I do for a living. Maybe you didn't realize that, but what I do for a living is develop leaders. So I help organizations develop a strategy for how to develop leaders. And of course, I also go and I speak at conferences and meetings to large audiences, and I facilitate workshops for different kinds of organizations. And most of the time, they're for people who are already in a leadership position or are being groomed to becoming leaders and managers. And all of my work centers around helping people be better managers and better leaders. And so when I meet people like Jeremy, who are really doing it with his whole heart, and he's seeing the results, it just is so gratifying, so satisfying to me. And I hope that you will take some action as a result of listening to this episode, because, knowledge and inspiration, all that is really good, but only if you take action will there actually be some kind of results for you and change. So you need to go do that, okay? Promise? And you can take action also by leaving comments or starting a discussion in the comment section of the show notes page, which is talentgrow.com/podcast/episode34. And if you care to share this episode with someone that you think might benefit from it, all you have to do is just ping them, send it to them in an email, or send it to them via social media. And that way someone else gets to benefit. And I, of course, benefit by reaching more people and making a bigger difference in the world, which is something that I really care to do. So in the meantime, thank you for listening. Thank you for sticking around. I appreciate you, and I hope you make it a great day.
Thanks for listening to the TalentGrow Show, where we help you develop your talent to become the kind of leader that people want to follow. For more information, visit talentgrow.com.